Hello again, this is Jason Goldberg, and welcome back to the newest episode of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast. And today, I am going to be ruining the ego. Oh. Dude, you're supposed to be warmed up. It's disgusting. Okay, anyways, so back to the ego. Common knowledge and belief is that the ego is your enemy, that it works against you, that it holds you back from growing and being successful, that it hurts your relationships, and it makes you an arrogant schmuck if not taken care of. But what if your ego can actually be your gateway to not only your own personal fulfillment, but to actual meaningful contribution in the world? What if it's not something to demonize, but instead it's something to utilize? That's what I want to talk about today. Now, why did I choose to ruin this topic specifically? Well, it's because I've seen firsthand so many times for myself and the people I work with where ego, or more accurately, the misunderstanding of the role of ego, has caused them suffering and decreased the joy they feel in life. Maybe for you, either based on feedback from other people or from you just being super self-aware, you sometimes worry that your ego might be holding you back from operating at your fullest potential. Or maybe you don't take as much action on your dreams because based on messages from your family growing up or from society at large, you think your aspirations are misguided because they seem selfish or self-serving. Or maybe you've played small or kept yourself hidden because putting yourself out there would make you a show-off, a shameless self-promoter, arrogant, someone you would never want to be seen as. Or it's quite possible there's someone in your life that you believe has a big ego and you aren't really sure how to deal with them. A boss, a coworker, a friend, a client, or someone in your immediate family. If any of those resonate with you, today's show is going to be super helpful to be in a place of more purposeful creation and achievement, less feelings of lack or inferiority, and a chance to strengthen good relationships or even rebuild damaged ones, and to ultimately know how to use the ego instead of being used by it to get what you want without hurting yourself or others in the process. Now, before we dive into how to do all this, let's slow this down and get a definition of ego, since everyone I talk to seems to have some kind of variation on the concept. Ego is actually defined by Oxford Dictionary as a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. Now, that alone seems pretty innocent to me, but in my conversations with others around this topic, and I'm sure you've heard this before too, ego evokes more of a sense of narcissism or being self-centered or arrogant, being driven by goals and aspirations that are only self-serving. Celebrities, politicians, executives in large corporations, entrepreneurs of big tech firms, many of them would be described as having these gargantuan egos. So if we have that view on ego, that it's a demon spawn of Satan whose only function is to focus on world domination at the expense of the little peons who get in the way, then yeah, we probably want to get rid of that as quickly as possible. That's some Marvel villain level shit, and I am not trying to arm wrestle with Thanos. Talk about a god complex. Cute jewelry there, Big T. Anyways, you wouldn't be the only one to think that ridding ourselves of the ego is the best course of action. There are countless articles on getting rid of the ego. There's an entire book called Ego is the Enemy, and even the head coach on my team, Tanya, has a sweatshirt, which kind of sparked the idea for this episode, that says, "Your ego is not your amigo." In fact, just Google that, "Ego is not your amigo," and you'll see just how far and wide this pop culture slang has infected the zeitgeist of our times. Now, I'm a bit of a contrarian, especially when language is involved. And when we use a single word like ego to encapsulate the entirety of a human being, it makes me want to pause and dig a little bit deeper. So the etymology of the word ego comes from the early 19th century Latin I. That's like the letter I, not the two glossy globes in your face holes. I can't say I've ever found the origin of a word to be a single letter, not to mention a letter that is so preloaded with so much potential controversy, both spiritually, like who am I? Do I even exist? And more practically, the I, me, the chorus of the theme song that's to be expected from a self-centered toddler who thinks anything not nailed down belongs to them, but maybe not quite as acceptable or cute and cuddly when it's an adult who seems to be ruthless and with a God complex-like sense of self-importance. There's tons of exercises and even psychedelic experiences you can undertake that are focused on getting rid of that I, to essentially experience what's called
An ego death.
I know, sounds like a blast. Maybe the goal instead of an ego death is an ego awareness and a shift to ego as a servant instead of ego as a master. To understand that the presence of our ego and the extent to which it affects our lives are two completely different things. It's like if you have young children in your life and they invite you to a tea party. You know the ones where you're sitting at a super low table where your shins keep knocking into it. You're sitting on a chair that's the width of less than one of your butt cheeks, surrounded by teddy bears and top hats and gorillas in gowns. Ah, the finer things in life. You and the child both know very well that there's no actual tea in the teacups, that the scones are plastic, and that the conversation with the other guests is likely going to be pretty one-sided. But that doesn't stop you from enjoying the experience. You don't spend time trying to get the kid to stop having these stupid parties because you always leave thirstier and hungrier than when you arrived. No, you play the game. You know it's make-believe, and you don't put any pressure on that experience to be anything different than it is. In the 1879 novel, The Egoist, George Meredith writes, "Possession without obligation to the object possessed approaches felicity." Now, felicity means intense happiness. Let me say that quote again. Possession without obligation to the object possessed approaches felicity. So to me, he's pointing to not getting rid of our ego or trying to overcome our ego, but instead the dance of knowing you are full of ego and yet still not feeling obligated to the whims or desires of the ego. When we can possess an ego while not being a slave to that possession, we are heading in the direction of happiness. The issue isn't that we have an ego or selfish needs or occasionally completely self-centered attitudes or a focus on self-importance at times, but rather that we give into them without questioning where they came from and to see if there's a healthier way to satisfy them. Just like the quote from the Bible isn't actually that money is the root of all evil, but instead that the love of money is the root of all evil. The story we create about the significance of money is the root of all evil. And the same thing applies here. The degree to which we put significance on the presence of our ego and the story we make up about our ego, and we don't get that we're just sipping some chamomile tea with some of our closest stuffed friends, that's what dictates how much our ego is actually a problem versus it being a co-creator in our lives. Saying the ego alone is the enemy is like saying that speed bumps when you're driving are the enemy. They're there to moderate your speed and to keep you and other people safe. Or that the feeling of fullness when eating is the enemy. That's there to make sure you don't binge yourself into a food coma. Or that the gas gauge on your car is the enemy. It's there to make sure you don't get stranded on the side of the road at mile marker 666 in Murderville, Maine. What if instead, just like all those things, the ego is simply a neutral, intelligent system that we have built into us to help guide us to make better choices? Okay, so beyond not attaching to it and understanding that at its core, it's a neutral, intelligent guidance system, how can we actually use it? Well, this is where I want to share a simple distinction that I hope is going to ruin the concept of ego for you forever. I split the ego up into two different lenses, if you will. One that serves and one that kind of doesn't. This is going to be your new guide on how to navigate the ego and have it not just be your amigo, but actually help you to thrive. The two ego types I want to talk about here are what I call the FREEgo and the FLEEgo. The FREEgo, which has the base word of free in it, is the ego that helps to create a sense of freedom. It involves free will, free thinking, freedom to explore ways to get better and be better, and freedom from having any happiness dictated or determined by that achievement. Free and open to guidance and direction from others, freely giving ourselves to be of service and contributing to the world while also being free and open to receive the benefits of that service and to have our needs, wants, and desires met without making ourselves wrong for having those desires and while also not having an attachment to those things. Free to set boundaries to guard our energy and our time without being harsh, mean, or uncaring, and still respecting the people and situations we're creating boundaries with. Now contrast that with the FLEEgo. The FLEEgo has the root of flee, like running away from something, and this is the ego that's always on the run. It's fleeing introspection to see whether our motivations are pure and come from a place of love and enthusiasm or from a place of fear and lack. Fleeing vulnerability and being fully seen by the world. Fleeing from trying new things for fear of getting it wrong. Fleeing from difficult conversations that require courage, or potentially worse, having those difficult conversations without any true care or concern for the other people involved. Fleeing any outside help, because then we'd have to admit we don't have it all figured out and we don't know the answer to everything. Think about this in your own life, specific situations where you may have been operating from your FLEEgo instead of your FREEgo. This is not an opportunity to beat yourself up. And a matter of fact, you probably could find several examples of where you were actually operating from your FREEgo as well. This is all a spectrum, a moment-by-moment choice, an intentional way of being. So, how do you start operating from the FREEgo instead of the FLEEgo? Well, step one is awareness and observation. When things are feeling stressful, when you're beating yourself up, you're feeling strain in your relationships, stuckness in your work, a constant seeking for validation, approval, or the next thing to get that dopamine hit of happiness, a feeling of being overly judgmental or finding fault with others, or if you feel like you're playing small or hiding out when you want to be doing more and showing up, check in with yourself. Do you feel a sense of freedom in those moments? Do you feel expansive and creative, or do you feel heaviness? Does some part of you just want to shut down, run away, and either ignore or distract yourself from the unease you're feeling? If you notice that your experience is more stressful than blissful, you're probably operating from the FLEEgo, which is great because that can be your indicator. Like the speed bump, that feeling of fullness, the gas gauge on your car, that something may be a bit off in your approach to life in that moment. See, everything has a shadow and a gift side to it. So each stressful thing you're feeling has a counterbalance. There is a FREEgo counterpart to every FLEEgo experience. That is your direct route to switching from the ego as the enemy to the ego as your amigo, a dear friend who's trying to guide you back to center. The way we find that counterbalance is to practice aligning our egoic nature with a service-based one whenever possible. When ego is the spark for contribution, then the byproduct is service, which to me is a totally acceptable way to equalize your own egoic needs. Essentially, it's asking the question, how can your own selfish needs or focus on self-importance involve serving others and growing yourself? For example, let's say you want to look good. Great. What do others get out of that? You want to be seen as intelligent. Awesome. How does it help someone else? Maybe you're judging someone for the way that they're acting or reacting in a situation. Wonderful. Where have I acted just like that in some other situation in my own life? Seeing that helps me to be understanding and compassionate for how it must feel to think you have to act that way. And when I do that, I'm no longer requiring my ego to win, to be right, or to feel superior to this person. Maybe you're judging yourself for not being further along, not knowing all the answers, waiting for someone else to save you or tell you what to do. Maybe you're afraid of putting yourself out there in the world. Thank goodness. This is my FLEEgo pointing me to practice 5% more self-trust, 5% more self-love, 5% more self-acceptance for all my thoughts and feelings and experiences, and the perspective to see that all those things are temporary and transient if I don't overly attach to or take them seriously. Maybe you want to be known for your work in the world. Fantastic. How will that work spread further by its ripple effect on others than it ever could have by your physical presence delivering it alone? And sidebar, this one has been big for me. Ego has absolutely driven my service and my contribution to the world, both personally and professionally. See, growing up, I never felt enough. I never felt lovable. And so in order to feel the things that I wanted to feel, I developed humor and empathy to feel enough. to get connection. And cultivating that shadow part of my ego, that desire to feel love and approval, allows me to use those things now in my business to really be of service. It has turned the shadow into a gift, the FLEEgo into a FREEgo. And like Oprah says, helping others is the way we help ourselves, which is so true. Whether you get the dopamine hit from doing good or you feel you're somehow atoning for past wrongs by doing right, the fact remains, we cannot help others without feeling helped ourselves. A healthy ego is an aligned one that has at least part of its ambition and drive to succeed pointed inward and focused on increasing our consciousness and not just our status. We hear this all the time, that we should focus on being more self-aware. Well, we need a bit of the idea of separateness that the ego can provide to know how truly self-aware we are becoming. There's a level of self-importance that is needed in order to even have the desire for our consciousness to increase. Demonizing the ego cuts us off from that opportunity for growth. It's like people who say they love deep conversation but hate small talk. That's like saying you hate the surface of the ocean, but you love the bottom. How could you know one exists without the other? How could you possibly access the latter without the former? Your ego can be used as an excavation tool to find the buried treasure that's been there all along. The ego isn't a painting of who you are. It's an art gallery with paintings of what might be you hung up on every wall. And at the center of each painting is a mirror for you to look into. And when you look into that mirror, you will see for yourself if the painting matches who you truly are. And if it feels like it doesn't, you move down a painting and try again. Eventually, what you'll find is a painting that feels like home. It may be of how you truly see yourself or your ambition of how you want to see yourself. But either way, it won't feel separate. It will feel true. This is the road to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which at the top has self-actualization. So that highest level of attainment is both centered on the self, but includes living into a potential that allows you to contribute more, to be more deeply connected with others, and to focus on unity. These are all the byproducts of being self-actualized. And without the ego, we would never even embark on that journey to begin with. My hope is that today, with this new understanding, you start to meet your ego with curiosity, with love, with understanding, and with a co-creative mindset that allows you to work together as a team to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, to create deeper connections with the people in your world, to have more of a sense of humor and perspective on life and the role of your ego in it, and to do that all from more of a place of joy, hope, optimism, and contribution. Now, before I skedaddle, and that's a word I think we should be using in our vocabulary much more every day, I want to share a story I love from Osho. The circus had just finished a show when one of the zebras became sick. The veterinarian that checked the zebra out believed it needed some rest and arranged for him to be taken to a nearby farm for some R&R. As soon as the zebra arrived, he decided to try to make friends with other animals. He came across a chicken and he said, "Hi, I'm a zebra. Who are you?" "Well, I'm a chicken," said the chicken. "Well, what do you do?" asked the zebra. "Well, I mainly kind of scratch around and lay eggs." Then the zebra sees a cow and says, "I'm a zebra. Who are you?" "Well, I'm a cow," said the cow. "And what do you do?" asked the zebra. To which the cow replied, "I graze in the field and give milk." Finally, the zebra meets a bull. "I'm a zebra," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm a bull." "Oh, and what do you do?" asked the zebra. "What do I do?" snorted the bull. "You silly looking ass, take off your pajamas and I'll show you." Us taking the presence of and the messages we receive from our egos seriously, or thinking we need to overcome it or transcend it completely in order to be happy, is no different than this bull wanting the zebra to take off its pajamas and fight him. If we believe the donkey in pajamas is a threat, we challenge it to a fight. But when we see that it's just a curious zebra, well, we may have just made a new amigo for life. That's all I got for you today, folks. If you love this episode, please make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And I would be honored if you would take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and review so that more people have the chance to join our soul fam of ruiners. Make sure you screenshot and post this episode to your stories and tag me at @JasonGoldberg so I can show you some love back. And feel free to DM me with your feedback or any questions, and let's keep ruining shit together. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for all the love. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Peace.